Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. Depending on, I guess, your time zone here in Texas, it is officially noon. So happy afternoon, maybe good morning. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We've got some people still coming in. I see numbers going up. So we'll give it a couple of minutes before we really get into the nitty gritty for today. But really excited to bring a great presentation going over notes today specifically. We've got Tracy Z with us. And to provide a brief introduction for her before we bring her up and let her start her presentation. So Tracy Z beginning investing in notes over 35 years ago. Since then, she has handled millions of dollars in real estate notes since 1988. Tracy co-founded a note buying company in 97, which eventually developed into noteinvestor.com. This is an online newsletter for private investors, and Cash Flow Expo, which is a virtual summit that she hosts as well, one of a couple. So one of, I think, her many passions is specifically working with like-minded female and lady investors. So she created not only the Wise Women Investors and the Wise Women Expo. So Tracy, with all of this in mind, specializes in the use of creating creative partial structures, tax-advantaged retirement funds to purchase notes. She helps landlords wanting to ditch tenants to be the bank by safely creating and holding paper. A well-known educator, she has a passion for sharing her knowledge and guiding others on their note investing journey. So just in a moment here, we'll bring Tracy up. Really quick, a few housekeeping items I do have to go through. So it's always a great day when we're learning, we're teaching, I guess, depending on what side of the line you're on. But with all of that in mind, please understand, and this is something I'm sure you've heard me say or other, presenters, IRA specialists say if you're familiar with our platform. But a quick disclaimer, Quest Trust Company does not provide any sort of tax, legal, investment, or deal structuring advice. We don't endorse any products, services, or investments of any type. So please understand that as we go through the presentation, all information and materials are for educational purposes only. All parties are encouraged to consult with their attorneys, accountants, and financial advisors before entering into any type of investment or whatever kind of professional advice that you seek or that you have, right? So thank you all for joining us again. Please post in the chat where you are joining us from today, whether it's East Coast, West Coast, you're local to Texas, you're way up north, right? We'd love to know where everybody is at. So that is, I think, everything that I've got for y'all. We'll let's see, have Tracy join us. Tracy, thank you so much again. I know I said it offline, but for taking the time today, and we really appreciate you wanting to share your knowledge and your expertise with our platform, not only just clients, but anybody interested in the self-directed space and retirement investing, all of that. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. I love that you guys do these Saturday events. It's a great way for people to gain knowledge and education without being sold anything. So I appreciate people taking their time on a Saturday, and I promise to leave you with some things to think over and hear if people have questions.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I'll drop off here and we'll go ahead and bring up your slides and just let you get into it.
All right, sounds good. Okay. Excellent. I am going to get rid of that. All right. So notes in retirement accounts, as mentioned by Colin, that's one of my specialties. I've actually been doing this for over 35 years. And if you do something that long, you got to love it, right? So I'm here really to share with you why still I love notes after all these years, after 3 decades. And the best place to start off are the benefits of owning notes and IRAs. So I love notes. We're talking about a promissory note. Somebody promises to pay that are backed by real estate. Now, a note can be unsecured, meaning if they don't pay, you don't have anything to take back. I don't like those kind of notes. Notes can be secured by other things like cars or automobiles or mobile homes. But today specifically, we're going to talk about my favorite kind of notes, and those are notes backed by real estate. So that is something we know and love. We know it's concrete. And while you do not own the real estate when you own a note, someone else owns the real estate. You own the debt on that real estate. And if they don't follow through on their promise to pay, then you have a lien instrument, a deed of trust in Texas, where many of you are from, a mortgage in states like where I'm from in Florida, that you can exercise your rights as a lien holder and take back the property for non-payment, just like a bank can. Now, my goal when I buy notes is to buy performing notes that are paying well, that will continue to pay well, because I don't want to own the real estate anymore. I've been there. I've done that. I started out real estate investing because when I started out buying notes or being in the note business in 1988, I went to work for a guy who'd been already doing it since the 1950s. So it'd been around a while. It's not a new thing. That should reassure you, right? But one of the things when I worked for that company, I learned so much, but I was not allowed to buy notes because it was considered a conflict of interest. And so I was buying real estate, and some I did with seller financing, some traditional bank loans. And the more I bought real estate, the more I knew for sure I wanted to be a note investor. I wanted to be a lien lord, as we call it, not a landlord. So I like having a note with cash flow that's backed by real estate. I hope I never own the real estate by performing good due diligence, but I know that's always my ace in the hole. That's my security. If for some reason people don't make payments on that promissory note. I also like notes because they have good returns. I know it's tough for real estate investors out there with appreciating values and the increase in interest rates and costs like taxes and insurance and maintenance and repairs and all the things that go into that with inflation, that it's getting harder and harder for people to earn cap rates that you traditionally measure investment real estate by. So you're talking people having troubles getting cap rates over 7-8%. And we can get returns on notes, good, solid performing notes in that 9-10% range, higher if there's a little bit more risk. But I usually like to target those notes that are good quality, that are in that 10% range. So we can get good yields, good ROI, return on investment. We look at it as time value of money, our return over time, because we're buying a note typically that amortizes. That someday is going to pay down to zero. So we want to earn more than the interest rate on the note, which means we get some good discount in there as well. So that's the kind of notes I target. Generally, I like seller finance notes, notes that already exist where somebody sold the property and took back a note. And it might surprise you, but every year we run big statistics. They're on our website if you want to see them. But over 25 billion with a B in seller finance notes are created every year. And top states happen to be Texas, Florida, and others. We publish the top 10. But seller financing's been around. You could also create new notes. If you're going to actually lend money and originate notes, we definitely suggest you do that to investors just because of the lending laws. But when you're buying existing seller finance notes, a lot of those are already in existence and the buyer borrower actually lives in the property. They're not necessarily investment properties for them. I love notes because they are less hands-on than real estate. Nobody calls the bank at 2 a.m. when they've locked themselves out of the apartment, or 3 p.m. when their kids flushed a stuffed animal down the toilet, or all the other calls I used to get when I was a landlord. So less hands-on. It means I can enjoy my life more, and it means that I can do more notes than I could do real estate deals. So as I age, I value my time even more than I used to. And so I like notes because they are less hands-on. That also, by the way, makes them great for self-directed retirement accounts where you're not supposed to be providing a service to your account. So they're less hands-on. You don't know properties to fix up and manage. Just need to manage the note payments, more of a managerial, and you can hire a third-party servicer, as we'll talk about today, to make it even less hands-on. I like notes because they're creative. If you do something for a long time, you get good at it. It can be, you'd think you would get boring, but I find that every deal, especially seller finance, has a story, and there are creative options to buy them. And one of those creative options are partials, where we buy the right to receive a certain amount of the unpaid balance over time. So if there was a 30-year note, we might buy 15 years of it. There's creative options that are out there with wraps, wraparound mortgages, all-inclusive trust deeds, where you leave low interest rate financing in place at 4%, and you wrap it with something like 10, and you can earn that spread. We'll talk a little bit more about that today as well. You get to harness the power of interest. It's been said that compounding interest is the eighth wonder of the world. There's a dispute of whether Einstein actually said that, but it sounds really great when you say Einstein said that. But either way, compounding interest is amazing, and using it tax-free or tax-deferred is even better in your self-directed retirement account. I like notes because I can control the investment level. So I like notes where my borrower payer has some equity, some skin in the game. But if I want to lower my investment even more, I might say, well, they have a loan to value of 80%, but I'd really prefer, especially on I do some land deals. Maybe I don't want to be in it more than 50% of the value. Well, I can say that, but I don't have to discount the note down all that far if I look at something like a partial with one of those creative options. So I like to be able to control my investment level because always remembering, while I don't own the property, that's what I will take back if I don't get paid. And I want to make sure I have lots of cushion in there if should that ever happen. And you wrap all those benefits up into a tax-free or tax-deferred self-directed retirement account. Could be an IRA or an HSA or a 401k or a Roth or traditional, all the great things that we talk about. And those benefits get even better. And notes are especially great in retirement accounts because we don't get things like depreciation. So when you buy real estate, there are some tax benefits to owning real estate in the form of depreciation on your regular income taxes. Well, you don't get that sort of thing with notes. That interest income often gets taxed as ordinary. So the great thing about putting them in a tax-free or tax-deferred retirement account is you don't have to worry about that or the depreciation or those kinds of taxes that might happen. So they are great for that reason, along with the less time commitment for your retirement account. Now, look, Quest does an excellent job talking about why to use a tax-advantaged account, but just in case you need a little motivation, just look at the difference when you look at making contributions, say $6,000 a year. Now it's higher now this year, especially if you're over the age 50 like I am, you get to contribute more. But depending on the type of account, and your Quest rep can assist you with this. But just look, if you contributed $6,000 a year for 25 years, you got a return of say 12%, and we compare it to a 30% tax rate during the years you make contributions and a 20% tax rate during distribution years. And you can see that, hey, just saving and investing is great because you'd have $600,000 with that interest over that time period. But in a tax-deferred account, it's going to be worth $900,000. In a tax-free account, $1.1 million. So that's just the power of time, compounding interest, and add in some tax benefits to it too. And when you're considering tax-advantaged accounts, you really got to think about, when do you want your tax advantage? So contributions are going to either be taxed before or after. So like a traditional IRA, you get a tax deduction when you make a contribution. But when the money comes out, it's going to be taxed. So that's the distribution side. With a Roth, the money goes in, contributed after tax. When it comes out tax-free. And one of my very favorite accounts to use strategies on is the HSA, because it's the best of both. You get a benefit going in, you get a tax deduction for making contributions, you get a benefit going out. And so HSA is one of my favorite. Now, you've got to have a high deductible insurance plan, but if you're self-employed or have been for many years, most of us, that's what we use. So I really love the HSA, but any of these accounts are great. And of course, you've got your 401k options with traditional or Roth options there. So you got simples and SEPs and all kinds of great things. But I just want to make sure that people are thinking that you can apply these note strategies inside or outside of retirement account, and all those kinds of retirement accounts are great. Now, we talked a lot about theory. Let's start looking at some examples, because I think we all learn best by examples. So this was a note my IRA purchased in Georgia. It was a single family residence. Believe it or not, there's still some notes around in places that you can buy notes where sales prices aren't crazy expensive. This one had some good seasoning on it. That means they've been making some payments on for a while. And so the sales price was $40,600, but it'd been a while and values went up in this town, like a lot of towns. And it was worth the property itself $90,000. Now remember, we don't own the property, but we own a note that's backed by the real estate. So we always look at the value of that real estate. On the negative side, this buyer did not put much money down, only $900. So that note started out with seller financing at $39,700 for 30 years at 10%, nice interest rate. The payment was $348.40. And over 5 years, the payments had been made, 61 payments. Now, because of that, the balance had paid down, not a lot, but to $38,297. But the buyer had a lot of equity because the value of that property had gone up to over $90,000. So if you take the balance that the borrower owes, divided by the property value, you get your loan to value, which is 43% loan to value. So almost 60% equity. The more equity a borrower has, the more motivation, the more likelihood that they will continue making payments. They have something to protect. Now, this note was purchased by my IRA for $33,395. If you take what my IRA invested, divided by the value of property, you get 37% investment to value. Now, investment to value is different than loan to value. That's what me, or my IRA in this case, has invested in the deal. So I have even more equity if I ever had to take the property back. And that's good because it costs some money to go through foreclosure and they never leave the property in good shape. So I usually have some fix-up costs as well. So this is a nice, very low ITV. I mean, most ITVs are under 70%. If you can get under 50%, even better. So this one's a very safe note. We got some discount in it. So the balance, the UPB, we call it unpaid principal balance, was $38,297. We paid $33,395. So the difference is the dollar discount. So $4,902 is the dollar discount. Now remember that note had a face rate of 10%. That's what the borrower paid. But because we paid less than the unpaid principal balance, we're receiving payments over time, we put that into our financial calculator, run a time value of money calculation, an IRR, and we're actually getting 11.85% return over time on our $33,395 because we discounted it down. We're getting 299 payments of $348.40 less a servicing fee. So that is a good, solid note. That note ended up paying off early. They ended up refinancing, and happy to say that made our yield go up. When you buy notes at a discount, you get your money paid back sooner. Your yield actually goes up. So be prepared. The only bad thing that happens when notes pay off early is you got to go out and reinvest your money and find another good note. But anytime you get a return and you get an increase in yield, I'm happy camper on that. So when I talk about tips for buying real estate notes with settler to retirement accounts, I kind of like to break it into these 10 tips just to make it very approachable and weave some more examples in throughout the presentation. I welcome you to ask questions. If they're number related, it's usually good to ask them when the screen's up there, but we can always come back to them. And I know we're also going to take questions at the end. So whatever works for you also works for me. So tip number 1. Know your type. What type of investor are you? Are you active or passive? I'm not talking active or passive based on IRS rules. I'm just saying you. Or do you want to be actively involved in your note buying and management, or do you want to be passive? Now, of course, you're not going to give a contribution with a service to your IRA, but I'm just talking about mostly like active in finding deals or passive in finding deals. And that brings us to, you want to buy wholesale or you want to buy retail. Now, we buy notes from sellers who sold a note, and we use strategies to find them. And because we spend some time and energy marketing in our regular day-to-day business, we also find some notes that we can put into the retirement account. So when you buy wholesale, you are generally going to get better pricing, but it's more active to be able to find those notes. Whereas if you buy retail, somebody's already located that note and is selling it to you, might make a little bit less rate. However, you don't have to spend the time looking for those notes. And it's become a lot easier, as we'll talk about in deal flow, to find those notes with things like Quest Trust and things like note listing sites and those sorts of things. Ask yourself, do you want to be a non-performing or performing note buyer? I like being a performing note buyer, even though I know how to buy non-performing notes. Some people like non-performing. If you're new to notes, I don't suggest you start there. I suggest you start with the performing note and get comfortable with it. Non-performing notes don't have cash flow, so you've got to have funds set aside to pay for. I mean, usually non-performing, you're going to do a couple of things. You're going to try to get the borrower back on track with some kind of repayment, forbearance, modification. If that doesn't work, you're going to try to negotiate cash for keys, get a deed in lieu foreclosure. And if that doesn't work, then you're going to usually start the foreclosure process. So all of that takes time. Foreclosure process definitely takes an investment for attorneys and other costs and filing fees. And so it's a long play. Some people like to buy non-performing notes because it's a way to get to the real estate eventually. I just prefer performing notes. I don't like dealing with the headaches and hassles of non-performing. It reminds me a lot like owning real estate again. I promise I'm not, I don't have post-traumatic stress syndrome from being a landlord. I promise, but you might think that after you listen to this, right? So I like performing, but you definitely have to understand non-performing, because if you have a note that's performing that stops paying, you're going to go through that same similar kind of process to get them back on track, get a deed in lieu, or start foreclosure. I like to look at every deal, risk versus reward. Somebody brought me a deal the other day they wanted me to look at, and they thought I should get a 6% yield because that's so much better than 5% at the bank. Sorry, people, for me, it's not worth the risk and the headaches of managing a note, even though they're easier than real estate, to earn 1% more than my bank will pay me in a CD. It's just not worth it. So always look at the risk versus the reward. On the flip side, I'd rather earn a 10% and rather than 12 if that 10% is secure and I have lower risk, and the 12 is a lot more risky. So it works on both sides of the scale, I think. So really know your type. If you like to sleep super well at night, if you like to take a little more risk for a bigger reward, non-performing versus performing, I really understand that. Also know if you want money now versus money later. There's people in the note business that actively are in the note business to make money now, and that's the kind of deals you don't do in your retirement account. Those are the kind of deals you do in your regular LLC or S corp, or maybe you have a side hustle, or you refer notes. Those are all possible. Those are where you do the money now. The money later deals, for me anyways, I like to use my self-directed retirement account. And I'm looking at, is that short-term or long-term? A lot of these notes that are performing are longer term. They're 20, 30 years, but you can do short-term notes as well. That tends to be more lending to other investors, maybe hard money loans or shorter term loans, rather than buying these longer term seller finance notes. So here is another IRA note purchase. It was a seller finance note as well. It sold for $91,900. It was in Texas. There was a down payment of $5,000. The seller agreed to let the buyer make payments instead of getting a bank loan, and it financed with seller financing $86,900 at 9.5% at $800.29 a month. So a nicer sized note. It's nicer when notes have a payment of $500 or more, just because the servicing fees don't take a big a bite out of them. So this note had 249 months when it started. And you're thinking, that's weird. That's not really 20 years. It's not really 30 years. And all I can say is you see some weird stuff in seller financing. So they probably did this deal because the seller wanted 9.5 and the buyer probably didn't want to pay more than 800. And so when they stuck it in the calculator, that was a term of 249 months. That when we saw this note, quite a few months had been made already, and there were only 176 months left. So it had amortized down to $75,834. So that buyer had paid down their balance. And the buyer, there was 83% loan to value. And so they had some good equity, just about 20% equity. So that's a nice little note, good seasoning, good equity. We find that anything less than 10% equity has a lot higher risk of default. Things with more than 10% are good. Things with more than 20% are usually really good. So this is a note we actually found on a listing site. We agreed to purchase it in the IRA for $68,430. So just remember, I'm buying a balance of $75,008 and I'm paying $68,004 for it. Okay, I'm just kind of rounding numbers there to keep it straightforward. The discount, the dollar discount on that between the unpaid balance I bought and the amount paid out of the IRA was $7,404. And that's an investment to value of 74.5. So another good protection on a solid little note. Now, the plan was to buy this, put in the IRA, get a yield of about 11.36%, and maybe recapitalize with a partial, sell off some payments. I could go do it again in the IRA, getting that compounding on it. However, things change. I don't control everything that happens. And in this case, the borrower, again, refinanced. We saw this a little bit when rates were lower. We don't see as many refinances happening now that rates are higher. But in this case, the IRA collected 7 payments of $800.29. The note paid off early. And as I mentioned, because it paid off early, the yield actually went up. It was about a 25.74% return. It was actually more like 24% when I backed off the costs that my IRA had to pay for title and BPO and servicing costs. And those are the main costs when you're a note investor that you will see, or your IRA will encounter when you buy it in the IRA. Is you're going to want to get title insurance or update the title insurance that's there with a title report. You're going to want to get a BPO, or broker's price opinion, or drive-by appraisal to confirm that value. You are going to want to use a third-party servicer, and they're going to charge, around $25, $30 a month to service that. And then there's some other small fees in there, like recording your assignment and, that sort of thing, but they're smaller. But on average, most of the deals, if there's existing title insurance, we have maybe $750 cost. If you got to buy title insurance new, it's higher costs because it's based on the balance of the note. So that is another example of just a nice little, I knew when we were talking about know your type in tip number 1, and I knew my type for my self-directed IRA. I wanted a nice, performing, seasoned note where the borrower had good equity and, we could just get payments into the IRA every month. So that was the plan on it, and it paid off early. So maybe I bought too good of a note. I don't know. No such thing, right? All right. So tip number 2, have a playbook. Have underwriting guidelines. Remember, I came at this from the institutional side of note investing. We used insurance money and debenture money, and we had underwriting guidelines because a couple times a year, the state just normally comes in and makes sure you have underwriting guidelines to make sure that you're handling your investments appropriately. So I'm big on guidelines and sticking by those guidelines. You have flexibility. Of course, it's your money, but you got to have a playbook to know where you're starting. And one of the biggest things in your playbook are these ITV, investment to value thresholds I mentioned. You could also have LTV thresholds for the borrower. But I like to stay below 70% investment to value on a residential performing note. And if it's land, I like to stay under 50% investment to value. And mobile home and land, usually somewhere in between, depending on the quality, age of the mobile home. Know your target yields. Like we talked about, what is your target yield? If you're 6%, that would be a low target yield. I know a lot of people would love to sell you notes. I think target yields in this interest rate environment are probably between 8 to 11% on a residential note, higher on land or mobile and land. Know how to grade a note. And when you grade a note, we show you how to do that using a balancing of the scales, but you're certain things weigh more in balancing out or grading a note. So seasoning, how long they've been making payments, a note with 12 months seasoning, so much better than a brand new note with 0 or 1 or 2 months seasoning. Borrower's credit, good credit, goes without saying, is better than bad. No credit, in my opinion, is much better than bad credit. Equity, that's that loan to value, how much equity that borrower has. Location, we don't mind doing notes on somewhat rural properties, but I don't want them way out in the middle of nowhere where there's no resale opportunity. If you're starting out and you don't know a location, it's best to stay in your MSA normal areas. But we do see a lot of seller financing on rural properties. There's different litmus tests for that. You know, maybe over 25,000 population is good. A county seat is good. If there's a Walmart there, usually means there's some kind of industry. They do a whole lot of research. So that's kind of some of the ways we look at those rural notes. The property type, as I mentioned, that's different how you would underwrite a land, a mobile land, or a residential note or a commercial note. So really understand that and how that plays into underwriting a note. And then apply that playbook that you have with discipline and consistency. Don't just make it up each time it comes around. Really understand what your thought process is. And we talk a lot about underwriting and due diligence. I'm big on checklists and teaching people how to use a financial calculator, because that is so empowering and very important when you are underwriting notes. So tip number 3, talk about the money. It's all exciting, but really, if you're a note investor, you also got to learn to embrace the boring. Warren Buffett said the great moves are usually greeted by yawns. And a lot of people want to talk about this side of the business, but I think it's very important to making sure that you get a return on your investment and a return of your investment. So we use due diligence checklists, and we have, in addition to that checklist of all the things we like to check before we buy a note, I like to share these 13 questions that need an answer before you direct your IRA custodian to send that money. So we'll take a few minutes to talk about these. How long has the buyer / borrower / payer, the one making the payments on your note, how long have they been making payments, and are they current? What's that current value, condition, and occupancy of the property? And you're going to confirm that by getting a BPO. How much equity is there, both from the borrower side and your investment side? So the LTV, loan to value, versus ITV, investment to value. What's the credit worthiness of the buyer, and are there any bankruptcy filings? So that's very important to check. You can check that at the government website to see if there are any bankruptcy filings. Is there a servicer collecting and validating the payments? We buy lots of notes where there is not a servicer, and then we get them set up with servicing because we do a lot of seller financing. But if you're buying from another professional, they should have a servicer, third-party servicer, already collecting those payments. Do the documents match the terms presented for sale? So read through those documents, know what you're buying. Somebody brought me a deal the other day and they were having challenges, and I'm like, okay, well, send me a copy of the documents and I'll see if I can't point you in the right direction with somebody who can help you, like an attorney or something. And they said, oh, I don't have copies of the documents. Like, how can you own a note and not have copies? So, you know, that's the very first place to start, is to know what you're buying and match those up with what you're being told you're purchasing. Check to see if real estate taxes are paid current, and not just when you buy the note, after you own the note as well, and your servicer can help you with that. Make sure the property is insured for fire and other hazards. So you want to get a declaration page, just like when you maybe got a loan to buy a home and you had to give your mortgage company a copy of your insurance binder and name them as loss payee, additional insured. You get that benefit when you own a note. And so you want to be sure that property is insured and your IRA, if it's buying it there, is named on that policy. Talking about insurance, title insurance is very important. So is there title insurance? They call it a lender's title policy. And if it was issued when the note was created, you just want to make sure you get that updated to be sure the person selling you the note hasn't transferred it to somebody else. I'm not saying someone would do that, but sadly, if somebody was attempting to do something fraudulent, That's why we always update title no matter what. What is the lien position and what else is owed on the property? Sometimes when somebody brings us a note, they've collateralized it or they still owe money on the property from when they bought it. That's okay. We just need to make sure that gets paid off out of proceeds at closing. So we got to get a payoff statement. So we really want to know, are we in first position? If we're not, what other liens are out there? And who's paying them on, and do they need to be paid off at closing? Or sometimes they're behind you, not ahead of you. So all important questions that a title policy or title insurance or title report will answer. Who is the current holder or seller of the note being purchased? So sometimes there's been an assignment of the deed of trust or mortgage and an endorsement or a longe, as they call it, when they attach it to the note. Sometimes that is the case. Sometimes it's the original party. So you got to figure that out and make sure there's that chain of assignments and allonges if it's somebody selling it that was an original party to the documents. I also like to do a little history check on my seller. Just make sure that there aren't any court cases or claims against them. And that's pretty easy to do either with some Google sleuthing or by having somebody run a LexisNexis report for you, or any of those kinds of things you can do to do a little research on your seller as well as the person making the payments. Super important, where's the original promissory note? The deed of trust or mortgage gets recorded. You can get a certified copy, but you want that original note. You want it delivered at closing. And if it's been lost, there are some steps you can take, but it's not just accepting a copy. So there's some additional steps like affidavits that have to get signed if it's been lost. And then we're back to that 13th question, our baker's dozen of questions. What's my risk versus my reward for each strategy? So I really do like to look at that. When I was buying in the corporate world for 10 years, left there. So as I mentioned, I could start buying notes for myself. My husband and I started our investment company. I wanted to buy every note that came across my desk because I could. I was so excited, even though I knew all the underwriting, all the checklists, and all these different things. And I really had to learn to go, okay, some things aren't worth the effort, right? What's my risk versus my reward? And some things definitely are. So really understand that and figure that out for yourself as well. So that's my 13 questions when we talk about embrace the boring, which is really performing your due diligence. We talk about due diligence on the 3 Ps, the people, the property, and the paperwork. And all those questions that we just went over related to one of those 3 things. First, I look to the person to pay. If they don't pay, I'm looking to my paperwork to enforce my lien. And if I have to enforce my lien, then I'm going to take the property back. So I look through all 3 of those to make sure they line up and I have a good investment for myself or my IRA. So tip 4 is seek professional help. Don't do this alone. Please use a third-party servicing agent, an attorney or an accountant, a title company, an MLO, which is a mortgage loan originator if you are creating notes newly yourself, and the buyer-borrower lives in the property, and BPO providers, all great resources to have for professional help. And of course, in your IRA, your custodian. Spread the risk. Tip number 5. I'd rather own 5 $50,000 notes than 1 $250,000 note. Why is that? Because I'm spreading my risk around. All my eggs are not in one basket. So that's personally, that's how I would prefer to do it. Now, if you had one really great $250,000 note with a 30% ITV and have been paying a few years, that's a different level of investment, but I still would rather spread the risk around. So let's look at another IRA note purchase. Sales price on this one was $32,500. Down payment was just about $1,500. Started out at $31,000. 10 years, I paid off, amortized, no balloon at 9%. Payment was $392.88. They made 95 payments when the IRA bought it. And because there were delinquent taxes, no insurance, all kinds of problems, we negotiated a price of $89,024. The balance was $8,924. I misspoke. We negotiated a investment of $2,531 for those reasons that we just mentioned. So that was a really high discount on a small note, percentage-wise. It was a $6,300 discount. And that meant it was a really high yield. But there was a lot of risk involved in that deal. We ended up having to pay off those back taxes. And eventually this borrower did pay us back. We never solved the insurance problem, but we got a BPO on the land itself. So we felt there was sufficient value in the land. So, this one had a little more risk, and it was a small dollar note that other people wouldn't buy. So sometimes you get a really good yield, but I didn't start out showing you those kind of deals because your normal yields are your 10, 11%. But there are opportunities out there in certain situations. So tip number 6, be creative, find solutions, use what we call the partial purchase, discover things like wraps, all-inclusive trust deeds. All those are very, very powerful tools in the world of note investing. And to use those tools, you've got to do tip number 7, which is master the time value of money. And I happen to like the HP12C. A lot of people use the 10B. We also use software called T-Value software. But really, it comes down not to all these buttons on the calculator, but just 5 sets of letters. And that's the N for number of payments, the I for the rate, PV for present value, which is usually your balance, your PMT for your payment, and FV for future value. So just a quick little example. I talked about discounting notes. If you brought me a note that had 360 payments, 30 years, had an interest rate of 10%, it had a balance of 100,000 and it was $877.57 a month, that's a great rate. That's a great note. I'm still going to want a little bit of discount because I got some time and energy to buy this deal. And if they paid off tomorrow, I still want to know I made a little bit of money. So if I said, I'd like a 1% spread on this, that's fair. I would like to earn 11% over time. This is where you've got to understand the time value of money. It's not 1% on 100,000, right? You're talking about if I want to earn 11% instead of 10%, what am I going to pay for that cash flow? So we put it into the financial calculator. It's still 360 months. Now, instead of 10, I'm going to put in 11, not the face rate of the note, but the rate I want to earn over time. Payment's still $877.57. I can't change the terms on the buyer borrower. They're still going to pay the same amount and still pay at 10, but I'm going to want to learn 11% yield. So now I ask the calculator, what's my present value? Instead of being 100,000, what is it? And you solve, and that comes back and says 92,150. So I go, okay, if I want an 11% yield over time, I could pay 92,150 for those 30 years of payments. And, then I would run to make sure my investment to value, the value of the property, was protected and those ratios as well. And then that's a deal that I'd look at doing. So master that time value of money, and you will learn a lot of really cool strategies. People who've been investing in real estate for years, when they learn the financial calculator and start buying notes, are like, this is really cool. How come I didn't know about this sooner? So hopefully you've experienced that or will one day. So our number 8, tap into deal flow. How are you going to do that? Referrals and networking. You're in a great place with all the events that Quest puts on. If you want to do more wholesaling, there's direct mail, there's online there. And if you want to do more retail, there are note listing sites like PaperStack and others out there that list notes for sale people. It's like an MLS for notes, like there is an MLS for real estate. They do earn a commission, but only if you buy a note, and you have to perform your due diligence. Just like you were buying a piece of property on the MLS, you've got to perform all your due diligence to make sure it's a good note. Now, you may not want to go out and find notes. You might want to originate a note as a private lender to an investor. And this is an example of a new loan to an investor that my IRA did. The value was at $85,000. We wanted to keep the investment low, so we put it in at $40,000. It's 5 years, and then it ballooned. Had an interest rate of 8%, 266.67 interest only, and then it ballooned for $40,000 because it was new. There weren't payments made. We felt there was a 47% loan to value. The repairs and other things were being done out of the investor's pocket. And we did charge not a lot of points and fees with the IRA, only 1%, but it did that, and the borrower had to cover the costs. And so in this one, the yield is the note rate. This was back, this deal I did when rates were more in the 4%. So I didn't mind doing an 8. If somebody came to me now, my rate would be more towards 10% on the interest rate and 2 points on the origination fees. And so, these are kinds of deals that perhaps your IRA could do. You're not in the business of lending money. You're avoiding those owner-occupied properties for these kinds of deals because of the MLO situation. If I'm creating new seller finance notes and the borrower is going to live in the property, I use an MLO because I want to be very careful with Dodd-Frank. Just want to be sure to mention that. So tip number 9 is to learn from others. You already know that. You're here. You are listening to myself and all the other wonderful speakers that Quest brings on to these Saturday Lunch and Learns. But really, it's more efficient than figuring it out. You don't have 35 years to learn it, right? You want to learn it now. You want to do it now. So it's going to save you time and money. It's fun to talk to people. I mean, if you talk to someone about a financial calculator that knows nothing about it, their eyes are going to glaze over. You talk about note investing and due diligence, but when you talk about it with other people who like to do it or using your IRA, it's fun. You have a support system. Tip number 10, again, you already know this one, get self-directed. That's why you're here. Use a self-directed IRA custodian. Understand how to invest tax-deferred or tax-free with a traditional or Roth IRA. Don't forget about all the other cool accounts like the HSAs, the SEPs, the Simples, the solo 401ks. And really look for a note-friendly, self-directed custodian. Quest didn't ask me to put this in here. I'm just letting you know that every year my husband and I run this cool contest. It's called the Best of Notes. And you know how you vote locally for the best pizza joint or the best concert venue or something like that. Well, my husband came up with this idea. We should have this voting for all the best of in note investing. So best servicer, best title company, best note buying company. And one of the categories is best self-directed IRA company for note investors. And Quest has continued to win year over year that we run this contest. I think we're doing it 5+ years now. So you can see all of this year's winners at noteinvestor.com, best of notes. And in November, you get a chance to vote again. So anyways, I just shout out to Quest for all of the people that are so happy with their services. And I know even during transition, as you're seeing now, know that business continues, and there's a lot of great note investing opportunities out there. So once you are working with your self-directed IRA custodian, you definitely have to set up an account. You've got to fund that account through contributions, transfers, or rollovers. You've got to select your investment and perform your due diligence. Nobody else is going to do that for you. Then you will direct your investment of funds. We like to use title companies to do the closing because people don't want to give up the originals and I don't want to give up my money. So we use an attorney or title company to do that little transfer. Then the ownership gets transferred to your retirement plan. So it doesn't get vested in your name. I think you guys all know that if you've invested in your IRA. So Quest Trust Company, custodian for the benefit of your IRA, or maybe you have a profit sharing for a one plan. So remember that it gets vested, not in your name, but in your IRA's name or whatever entity is the custodian or holder for it. Important reminders, all the income and expenses go through to the retirement plan. So your borrowers make payments to the servicer remits those payments to your IRA. Avoid disqualified persons and prohibited transactions. No, you cannot lend money to yourself out of your IRA or your relatives, your ascendants or descendants. So you can't do that. It's a prohibited transaction. So don't even try. Don't get close. Just go do your regular deals out there. Plan for distributions if required. The great thing with notes is they're a little bit easier to distribute out of because you're getting monthly income, a little easier than distributing a piece of real estate, I think, when you get to that retirement age. Considering partnering on deals or other people's retirement accounts to grow your account. That's known as OPM, other people's money. Just be sure when you're partnering that you're getting title into your retirement account equivalent to the amount of money you put in. I don't believe in partnering where somebody else controls the whole investment and you don't have any control. That's just me. I have control issues. So I like to make sure I'm on the assignment or the deed of trust or the note or the endorsement to the note. And don't forget, partials are great for small dollar IRAs. Now, one of my favorite quotes is imperfect action beats perfect inaction every time. So do something. Don't take this knowledge and not use it, right? Do something with it. Please, 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 please. The sooner, the better. I'm not saying jump without looking or having a parachute. You perform your due diligence. And we have lots of great resources on our website, noteinvestor.com. My husband and I started, as a blog over, I don't know, 2008. So it's been a while now, right? We started our investing company in 97. We had a website then, but then we started blogging, and it's just grown over the years. And we have a special page called noteinvestor.com/101. We have a nice lunch and learn series and some free ebooks. So you're welcome to go to noteinvestor.com/101. And we would, love to reach out to you. So I am just going to stop my screen share now and come back on with you guys.
Amazing.
If you have any questions, and I talk fast, I apologize, but it's a lot to say in 45, 50 minutes.
That was great. A ton of information. And I will say as well that if that wasn't enough time to absorb everything, the recording will be posted on our YouTube channel within minutes of when we conclude this. So there's also that. A couple of quick announcements on the Quest side, and then we'll just dive right into the questions. We have a few good ones, Tracy. Everything more factual based. I think you did a great job of explaining the numbers, so I didn't have to interject or jump in or anything. So that was great. So as you can kind of see, and a lot of what Tracy talked about is how you can make these kind of investments, alternative real estate, promissory notes, through a retirement account, through a self-directed IRA. If that is foreign to you, if you are unfamiliar with how this works, what a self-directed IRA is, what is the process, how can I use it? That is what we are here for, and that is my role as an IRA specialist is to really help educate anyone who's interested in listening. So you can kind of see some of the different investment opportunities you have, not just in notes, but in real estate and all kinds of forms of private investing. If this is something that interests you, if you want to learn more, have questions, I highly encourage you all to scan this QR code, schedule a consultation with us. That way we can really connect and kind of get to the root of what your questions are and hopefully help you become a better investor, become a more knowledgeable, more useful investor with funds that you have in your retirement account. So with that being said, let's get into some questions, Tracy. The first one here from Joshua, I think, both of us can kind of tackle this, but HSAs, and this was a question from the very beginning when you really touched on the double benefits or the double whammy. We call it a lot of different things, from the best of both worlds to would you like fries with that, as Quincy has labeled it. But the health savings account, so an account that you can use not only to pay for qualified medical expenses, but if you self-direct it, to invest into notes and other deals that you could do through an IRA with us as well, right? Anything else to add to that?
No, that is your guys' specialty. And and I love them, except that I love them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're literally the best when it comes to the tax benefits. So it's so unique. There's not another account out there like that, where tax deferred going in can be tax free going out, with the caveat that you're using it for those qualified expenses.
Yeah, that's eat your cake and have it too, right?
Exactly. Yep.
I just will say that it's people do have to have a high deductible health insurance account, which is you probably know the rules, but it's something like $6,000 a year deductible or something like that.
Yeah, typically it's around there, and it does vary based on like who your insurance provider is. So one could say 5,000 is high deductible versus another maybe say 7,500, right? It really just depends, but typically 5,000 to 6,000 range. Mm-hmm. A few questions here from Abby Rov. First, when a performing note turns non-performing? How do you sell them? Where do you sell them? How long do they take to sell?
All right. So performing notes, a note that's making payments. A non-performing note is a note that's not making payments. The line between the two generally is 90 days, 3 months of no payments. Now it's officially considered non-performing. Sometimes people skip a payment, they get caught up, they skip a payment, but they start paying and they never catch up. Those are kind of like that's sub-performing. If somebody's making a payment every month, for me, that's performing. Then there's non-performing. And then there's something called re-performing, where they stopped making payments, they were non-performing, and now they're making payments again, or maybe somebody did a modification or forbearance to get them back on track. I like to see a note re-performing at least 12 months before I consider it performing again. However, I have seen, so that's kind of those industry gray areas where I've seen people say it's performing, but last month they had them sign a modification forbearance plan to get back on track, and they've only made one payment on it, but they hadn't made payments for a year. To me, that is not performing. It's not even re-performing. It's a hope and a prayer, but maybe. So I want to say all that to frame my answer to Abby's question. If a note goes non-performing, the first thing I want to do is figure out how I can get that buyer-borrower performing again. So I work with my servicing company to see if there's just, usually it's just a hiccup. Something happened. Maybe they lost their job. They had a medical situation. My intent is not to run in there and start foreclosure and take the property back. That's not how I'd want somebody to treat myself or my family. So we first try to work through the servicer with that buyer-borrower to get them back on track. That's number one goal. If they can't, whatever's happened, they've lost their job, they're moving, they don't want the property. This happened a lot when there wasn't a lot of equity and properties were upside down, right? People owed more than what the property is worth. We would offer them cash for keys, so that would deed in lieu of foreclosure. So if they deed it back, we do a title search to make sure everything was good. If they deeded it back, then they didn't have to have a foreclosure on their credit, and we didn't have to go through the time and expense, and they usually left the property in better condition. And then non-performing is where you actually start foreclosure action. And I will tell you, we do everything we can to work with people up to that 90 days. But if they haven't done anything, we don't dink around. You get your attorney to file foreclosure, because if they didn't take you seriously, now they will. So don't wait around thinking, I'm just going to sell that when it goes non-performing. That's kind of why I'm saying all of this. So can you sell a non-performing note? Yes. It's going to cost you, though. You probably paid performing note prices. You don't want to sell at non-performing prices, right? You're not going to get the same. So if there's a way to get it back performing again and then sell it, that's going to be to your benefit. But you can sell non-performing notes. People like to buy them. There's more non-performing note buyers than there are non-performing notes right now. And that is because everybody got so excited about non-performing notes after 2008. And now go look at delinquencies. There's not a lot of delinquencies out there, right? In general, compared to what there was after 2008. So a lot of non-performing note buyers with not a lot of non-performing note inventory. So I promise it won't be hard to find one. It's just you might not like the price. And where can you sell them? There are note listing sites that do sell them, or you could just network. There's all kinds of forums now on LinkedIn and Facebook. Just make sure you perform your due diligence on your borrower and use like a third party to make sure you get paid. But all of that is a long answer to Abby's question.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess a part two here from Abby. What I mean, and this is, certainly kind of the personal preference of the investor as well, but how does the demand of notes compare to buying the physical property, buying that real estate?
Well, we are not as well known as real estate investing. I mean, first of all, you're here, you know about a self-directed retirement account. Wow, you're like smarter than 1% of the rest of the population. And now you know about notes instead of real estate. So now you're like, smarter than 99%. Now you're like smarter than 99.5% of the population. You're in this really unique category. So, plenty of demand for notes. We sell notes outside the retirement company to banks. We have several banks that will buy these seller finance notes. There's lots of private investors. We have listing sites. You've got the internet. So, as somebody's buying notes, I think there's a lot of demand out there because I have competition compared to what it was 30 years ago. But that's the good side of the market too. Like competition always also breeds more notes being created than there used to be.
And Tracy, just out of curiosity, when interest rates really spiked, I guess, what was that, year and a half ago or so now, how did y'all notice, I mean, specifically with the demand to be a note investor and educating note investors, how much did y'all see that change?
Well, people like it better now, right? Because the rates are higher. But I laugh because I was getting the same rates when rates were 4 as I am getting now.
Okay.
I just knew how to discount a 4% note down to get a 10% yield. So, but yes, there's, interestingly enough, more people are interested. So that's okay too.
We are at the top of the hour here. Just if you've got the time, a few more questions to run through.
Absolutely,
we'll kind of just go through what's left here. Really quick, I'll take this one from Kimberly, who said, "I'm currently a private money lender in the real estate investing space and with Quest. Can we use our own self-directed IRA for our own real estate deals? What are the rules?" So can your IRA itself do its own deals, purchase its own real estate? Absolutely. Can it lend to you personally? Can it lend to Kimberly Williams to help with your own real estate deals? That would be a no. Unfortunately, those self-dealing, prohibited transaction rules kind of come into play there, where you're not able to actually lend to yourself, lend to a business you own, anything like that. But great question, Kimberly. Abby, I think in terms of seasoning on these note payments, was just curious kind of if you could define that a little bit more.
Yes, seasoning is how long they've been making payments on the note. So a brand new note has 0 seasoning. Your note with 12 payments has a year seasoning. A 2-year-old note has 2 years of seasoning. So it's really just, we usually say it in months. 12 months is like good. We buy notes with less seasoning. We just have to look for some other offsetting good things. I don't want a 0 seasoning note with 0 down payment and a bad payer, right? That doesn't sound like any good. But you give me a payer that didn't have great credit, but they've got some equity and down payment, and they've been making payments for 12 months. Yeah, I'll look at that. So seasoning just helps lessen the blow of less great quality, especially seller finance. Like, these people fell out of the banker's underwriting box somewhere. So we got to just sift through and figure out what that reason is and what are the offsetting positives to the negatives. And there's too many negatives, we don't do the deal.
Yeah, perfect. And then can you also elaborate on what you said a little bit earlier, money now or money later?
Yeah. So when I'm looking at a deal, I think about my strategy. Do I want to make money now or money later? So if I'm actively going to make money, like, I can flip a note, right? I don't even have to buy the note. I can wholesale a note. So if I find a note that I don't want to buy or don't have the funds to buy, I can refer it to another investor and make a referral fee. Those are the kind of deals that you make money now on. And I don't do those in my IRA because I don't want to look like I'm running a business out of my IRA. I'll let you speak to that if people have questions on that, but I like to keep everything clean. And so money now is money I'm going to use to eat, live on. And so that gets paid for and done outside my IRA. And money later, any kind of investment, long-term interest income, that's what I target to put into my self-directed retirement account because it gets the tax-free or tax-deferred benefits.
Yeah, and to your point, I like to say IRA does not stand for income retirement now or income now, right? It's income for retirement. So it's important to understand that when you are doing investments through your IRA, it truly is for the purposes of retirement savings. So that's something that you don't want to have to count on now. Obviously, there are unforeseen circumstances and things like that that come up, but generally your strategy should be to invest for later or money later, right? And then I think really the last few questions we have here are surrounding HSA. So I'll kind of touch on this briefly and also mention that if y'all have very specific questions, how does it pertain to you individually? Set up some time to speak with us. But really, when we're looking at who qualifies for an HSA? Can I contribute? What are the contribution limits? All of that. There are three things we want to look at. One, are you a dependent on somebody else's tax return? Typically, the answer is no. Two, are you on Medicare? And then the third one, which is normally the reason that most people can't qualify for an HSA, which is what Tracy already brought up, is that you have to be on a high deductible health plan. Abby, even if your husband's company may not offer the HSA, find out if he is on that high deductible health plan. Typically, that's an option that most employers provide. If so, you can set up an HSA with us, make your contributions through there, or really any custodian, right, that offers that. You would just need to make sure those three qualifications are met. And then to Kimberly's point, yeah, we'd love to see a higher contribution limit there. There are two different types of HSA plans. So a single HSA plan and a family for when your kids and spouse and you have dependents that are on there as well. Single plans are, I want to say 3,850 for 2024. Family plans are up to 7,600. We did just see one of the largest HSA increases this past year from 23 to 24 in recent memory. It was kind of a really big deal. So still lower. They are increasing them. The IRS is. So good news there.
Yeah, I agree with Kimberly. It's like, come on, people. Health expenses are so high. And you're trying to encourage people to save for it. So give us some higher thresholds. I'm with you, Kimberly.
They're so high, and really one of the biggest concerns when it comes to people saving for retirement is how am I going to pay for those medical expenses when I get older? So it certainly is an issue that needs to be addressed, and those contributions.
Yeah, and if people don't qualify for an HA, don't get bummed out. There's lots of other great plans that you qualify for, so don't get bummed out if you don't. It's just I like to mention it because it's a lesser known one.
Yeah, definitely, and you'd be surprised with the medical distribution. I guess qualifications or different allowances that they even have for Roth IRAs, not just for HSA. Yeah. So there are certain things there too. I think that was everything. Some thank yous and people really appreciating your time, as do we, Tracy. I guess if there would be a good way to contact you, should people go to your website? I know noteinvestor.com. Is there an email, anything like that they should reach out to as well?
Yeah, please go to noteinvestor.com/101. That's where you can download the free ebooks. And if you have questions, I really do answer my email. It's Tracy, TRACY, @noteinvestor.com. And you can see the noteinvestor.com there under my face. So it's just my name, Tracy, @noteinvestor.com. So thanks for having me here. I always enjoy doing this. I know people who give up some Saturday time really love the topic, and anybody rewatching it, that's okay too. I don't always give up my Saturdays either, but I've really enjoyed being here. So thanks for having me, Colin.
Yeah. And again, thank you for really sharing, just listening to you, we really see how much knowledge and experience you have with investing in notes. So I've got your email there in the chat, the noteinvestor.com/101 address. I hope everybody has a great rest of their weekend. Enjoy your Saturdays. If you're in Texas, stay cool. It's hot out here today. So thanks, Tracy, again, and everybody take care.